the flagship program in this state, right? And
A bullshit. A bullshit. A bullshit. A bullshit.
Yo, good evening, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. Thursday, August 29th, 10:05 p.m., less than 48 hours until the kickoff of Week 1 college football Saturday, which we are here to preview today in depth. We've got a preview of the Texas Longhorns' first game against Colorado State, a game in which they are favored by 32 points, and then we're picking the best games in college football for the week, as we will do pretty much every week, along with previewing the Texas game. With me tonight is my co-host, big Longhorn fan himself, a man that will also be watching a lot of college football this season, and rooting on the Longhorns to win the SEC in year one, Mr. Emmy Nixon. How are you tonight?
I'm doing great, man. I earlier today I got to play Austin Country Club, man. That was incredible. I played like ass, but it was amazing. I'm on cloud nine right now, man. College football's back. Football's back. Can't complain.
Absolutely. Excuse me. Absolutely cannot complain because we got a full slate of games tonight. We got the Colorado North Dakota State game, which I watched the full first half of, and I've been peeking in here and then as we've been recording tonight. That game, I believe, is almost over or it's gone final. I'm trying to check what the final score. It's 36, 31,
Shador hit his
26.
line.
Huh?
Sorry,
yeah, 31,
Shador hit his
26 at the
line.
2-minute warning. 31-26 at the 2-minute warning. Again, in college football, they have 2-minute warnings this year, just like the NFL. Okay, let's go ahead and get into this Texas-Colorado State game. It's the number 4 Texas Longhorns facing the Colorado State Rams of the Mountain West Conference in DKR at 2:30 p.m. in Austin, Texas on Saturday. Emmy Nixon, what are your key matchups that you are watching for in Texas's home opener?
Oh, it's pretty simple, man. Colorado State, if you know anything about this program, they run a classic air raid offense. They are very minimalist when it comes to the run game. Their run game is through the pass game. Like their run game is screens. Their run game is short passes. They don't really run the ball that much. It's really just they want to air it out and they want to throw it deep. And to me, it just comes down to like if this secondary is who we think they are, they'll be able to handle it and be able to limit this group. And I think that's the key matchup to watch for in this game. Colorado State likes to hit those in-breaking routes. If, you end up seeing Texas playing off covers that we saw at times last year, those in-breaking routes just absolutely killed us at times. So this year, I just really want to see the defense just play aggressively on the back end in particular. I want to see them get up into the skin of these wide receivers and kind of play press. I know that's a little bit much for the first game of the year, but that's what I want to see.
Yes. I have 2 matchups I want to highlight. Number 1 is I want to see Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton, who we've talked about all offseason as the starters on the interior defensive line, go up against Jacob Gardner and Drew Moss. 2 of the best offensive linemen on what was a very good pass-protecting Colorado State team last year. In 4 years of college football, Colorado State center Jacob Gardner has nearly 3,000 career offensive snaps. He followed Coach Jay Norvell to Colorado State in 2022 after spending 2 seasons in Nevada. It's one of the best centers in the conference. Drew Moss is a guy that they've had over at right tackle for a while now. They move him into right guard.
Uh-oh.
That projects to be the strength
Michael went
of
frozen
this
on
Colorado.
me. All right, hold on one
You're
second, y'all.
you're good on my end. Okay. Well, we lost Demi. Anyways, um, Drew Moss and Jacob Garner. I'm looking for this Texas defensive tackle group who's ever on the field to create some pressures early on and cause Braden Fowler Nicolosi, Colorado State's quarterback, to play under pressure, to get out of the pocket, to get rid of the football early. When given time in 2023, his completion percentage rose by 19% and his touchdown ratio flipped when he was pressured. 3 touchdowns and 7 interceptions when he was pressured. 19 touchdowns, 9 interceptions when he had a clean pocket. So I'm looking at the interior of that offensive line and Jacob Gardner, who was the 76th ranked center in college football last year, according to PFF, allowing 0 sacks, just 11 hurries. And Drew Moss, who was the 65th ranked tackle, who now moves into right guard, giving up just 1 sack last year. Between those two guys, they have 1 sack. I think if we see Alfred Collins and or Vernon Broughton as a combo, really create some internal pressure on the interior of the defensive line, that'll be a good indicator of where Texas stands on this interior of the defensive line going into Ann Arbor. Am I good now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
That was so strange. Like you just disconnected like randomly there, and then were you talking that entire time?
Yeah, everything was fine on my end. I
Weird.
was
Okay.
talking, you were clear on my end. I don't know what happened. I was just saying, like, the Jacob Gardner, who's their center, who's played nearly 3,000 career offensive snaps, who only allowed 1 sack last year, was the 76th ranked center in the entirety of college football, according to PFF. Only 11 hurries allowed. Along with Drew Moss, who's been playing right tackle for them, but moves into guard this year, was the 75th ranked tackle in college football, giving up just 1 sack. Between those two guys, they've given up 1 sack the past year. I want to see Vernon Broughton and Alfred Collins create some internal pressure, push the pocket, force Braden Fowler Nicolosi, who is Colorado State's quarterback, outside the pocket to make some hurry throws. Because as I mentioned, his completion percentage dropped 19% when he was pressured last year, and his interception to touchdown ratio flipped. 3 touchdowns, 7 interceptions when he was pressured, and 19 touchdowns, 9 interceptions when he was kept clean. So I'm really looking at that matchup, number one, because the interior of this Colorado State offensive line, there are no slouches. And number two, like, I want to see where this group is at going into next week in Ann Arbor. And then number 2 is, of course, Torrey Horton, who we talked about in our last episode of Dit Hole. He's their best offensive player, their number 1 wide receiver. Him going up against this Texas secondary, but in particular, Malik Muhammad and Jalen Gilbo. He's 6'2", 185, 190. He works across the middle. They line him up in both the slot and on the outside, and they target him a shit ton. He was targeted 18 times last year in their game against Colorado. He was targeted 21 times last year in their game against Boise State. Look for him to come on these like shallow crossing routes within 2 yards of the line of scrimmage. Look for him to get the ball on bubble screens. He's a good player. We talked about him last episode. But Fowler Nicolosi, their quarterback, at times will force feed him the ball. And when of the 17 interceptions that Colorado State threw last year, 7 were thrown when targeting Torrey Horton. It creates opportunities for the secondary. I want to see the secondary be aggressive, get up into these receivers, but I also want to see them make some plays on the football.
Yeah.
I feel like we haven't seen enough of that. with Texas in the past couple years. I'm looking at Malik Muhammad. I'm looking at Jalen Gilbo. Like, if you've been that guy in camp, let me see it on the field. And then obviously that Texas safety group with the ball hawks they have back there. I think those are the two key matchups. But overall, like, I think Texas is the better team on paper. Do you have a score prediction for the game? Will
My
they cover?
score prediction, I'm gonna say Texas wins it 42-13.
Okay, so that would be a
I think they would
31-point win. So I
barely
think
cover. I think.
no, barely miss out on the cover. I've seen the line at 32 or 31 and a half. Maybe it's come down since then, but it'd be right around there. I'll go 45-14. What'd you go? 42-13? I'll go 45-14. One more thing on the Texas game. Offensive and defensive MVP in this game for Texas. Who will it be? Just throw a prediction out there.
Offensive MVP, I'm gonna say is Jaden Blue. I think Jaden Blue will have a field day on the ground, and I think he's going to have a good day in the passing game as well. I think he's going to be able to establish himself in both phases there. And then defensively, I think it's Anthony Hill. I think Hill. I think in terms of coverage, we've questioned it a little bit in the past. Like, that's part of his game that he's got to develop. But I think in a game like this, it's a perfect opportunity for him to kind of show what he can do in that aspect. So I think we're going to see him make some plays in the passing game, and maybe even force a fumble here and there or something. I think he's just a playmaker in all phases.
I'll go Trey Moore defensively. Expect
All right.
a big game out of him on the edge, and then I will go Jonte Cook as my offensive MVP. I think he's
Okay.
going to have a big game this Saturday. Okay, so that does it for the Texas game. Do you want to just move on to our other games here? We'll have a lot more. A lot more will come out of our post-game show
Right.
on Sunday night, or a recap on Sunday night, what we saw, what was the good, what was some of the not so good. And then next week in our preview show, we'll be talking a lot. We'll probably go 30 minutes on the Texas-Michigan game. So that'll be that. Two more notes on Colorado State, actually, though. Jackson Warren, who is their projected starting tight end, he had season-ending shoulder surgery. Had a great fall. It stinks for the Rams, but they've produced some NFL talents at tight end over the last few years. Trey McBride is one of those names. I think we'll see how that impacts their offense. He was projected to be a big part of their offense. And then they had Mo Kamara last year on the edge. He was really good last year. They lose him. They have another edge player who was an athletic freshman All-American last year in 2023. He's coming into his sophomore season. I don't know how you say his name, but he's going to miss this game with turf toe. Ooh. And so I'm looking if Colorado State is going to hang around, like, where are they going to generate their pass rush against this offensive line? Right. Probably going to have to, like, bring some pressure. So if you're looking for something, if you're watching Quinn, like, let's make sure he stays upright, and let's make some good decisions, Quinn. I want to see Quinn have a big day.
Right.
Okay. Let's get into the rest of the week. So we have some big games here. So again, a couple points each, and then your pick against the spread. We'll start out first game on Saturday, opening up at 11 a.m. on ABC. It's number 14 Clemson, who's now favored to win the ACC after the Florida State debacle at most sports books, against number 1 Georgia, and the line is minus 13.5. Emmy Nixon, what do you say?
I see this game as kind of a defensive battle, especially early on in the game. I think Clemson's defense, you can't underrate just how good they are as a unit. I think it starts up front um, with this kid last year, Woods, who was a true freshman, kind of like of the same ilk that we view as Texas fans, Anthony Hill. They had their guy in Peter Woods. That's his name. Peter Woods, defensive tackle, had like an 87 PFF grade last year, if I remember off the top of my head. Um, he's if you're unfamiliar with his game, think of Dexter Lawrence, think of Ed Oliver, think of some of the best guys at defensive tackle in football. Like he's a absolute beast in terms of stopping the run. So with him up front, I think they'll be able to stop Georgia's run game to a certain extent. From there, I think they'll be able to have a good game plan coming out in the first half. I see this game as possibly being a one score game going into halftime. And then Georgia, I think, with Carson Beck being the best quarterback in the country, in my opinion, I think that's where they're going to pull away with all the weapons that they have at their disposal. I just don't see on the other side of things the Clemson offense being able to complete enough passes on tough third downs. That's the big question. Can Cade Klubnik be efficient enough on 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, and be able to convert?
When you're watching this game, I think it's important for Clemson. Number one, they have to make Georgia one-dimensional on offense. And what do I mean by that? They have to stop the run on 1st and 2nd down. They have to try to put Georgia in third to medium to long situations to force Carson Beck to make plays. Why do I say that? Well, the Bulldogs are going into this game. They're going to miss Roderick Robinson, who was one of their projected top 2 running backs, and they're possibly going to be without Trevor Etienne, a transfer in from Florida. So they're down their top 2 running backs, Trevor Etienne due to suspension, Roderick Robinson due to injury. Now, it's a massive offensive line. They have talented running backs behind those guys, but they're inexperienced. And this Clemson defensive front is no joke. But if you want people to believe in you, I need Peter Woods. I need some of these other guys up front for Clemson to TJ Parker to stop the run to the best of their ability on 1st and 2nd down so that you put Carson Beck and you kind of test him in these 3rd and long situations.
Right.
Carson, the quarterbacks for Georgia last year completed 54% of their passes in 3rd down in 7 or longer yards to go situations last year. Now, Clemson, their 1st and 2nd down run defense, or their 1st down run defense last year was not good. 4.5 yards average per rush allowed. Georgia averaged almost 6 yards per carry on 1st down. That match basically between the Clemson defensive line and the Georgia offensive line is going to decide, I think, how close this game is. And then number 2 for me, if you're Cade Klubnik, you just can't – this Clemson offense in general, but Cade Klubnik, you cannot give the ball away. You just cannot do it.
Yeah.
He struggled with fumbles. He's thrown some interceptions. I actually thought he played pretty good last year down the stretch. I think there's growth potential this year. I like some of the athletes that Clemson added in their wide receiver room. And I like Phil Maffa as kind of like that downhill, powerful running back. But in order for this to occur, they're going to need good protection. They're going to need 3rd and manageable. And he's got to make smart decisions. For me, I kind of have it playing out the same as you. I think Clemson will hang tough for a while. Georgia will pull away. But I actually see Clemson sneaking in a late cover here. I see it as like a 10 to 13 point victory for Georgia. I could be wrong, but I'm going to go Clemson and the underdog. I'll take the points, but I'll take Georgia to win pretty convincingly.
Yeah, I'm going to take the points as well. I think I see it the same as you. I'm going to say the final score is 30-23. I'll go with that.
I'll go 27-17. 27-17. Lower score defensive affair. Okay. Let's move on to our next game, which is going to be a battle down in Gainesville. The Florida Gators favored -2.5 when the Miami Hurricanes, number 19 team in the country, and one of the top favorites in the ACC, come to town. Amy Nixon, what are your thoughts and who are you picking?
The thing that I find so interesting in this game is like just the storyline battle between these two coaches. Just Mario Cristobal and Miami. If they lose this game, all of a sudden that seat gets really hot. Like 12-13 over 2 seasons. Like right now, like he did all the things you got to do in terms of recruiting and transfer portal and all that. But if you don't win this game week 1, then the kind of panic meter goes up to 9 or 10. Same thing on the Florida side of things. But from a football standpoint, I think the matchup to look at is this Florida secondary against this Miami passing offense. Cam Ward is, to me, one of the best quarterbacks in college football. And him being able to take care of the football is going to be the big key, in my opinion. So just getting the ball out quickly, making quick decisions, and not letting this pass rush kind of dictate the game, I think that's got to be the biggest thing. If Cam Ward holds on to it too long, his numbers go way down. And according to PFF, his passing grade, if he holds the ball longer than 2.5 seconds, goes from 90 to 53. His turnover-worthy plays goes from 6 to 15 turnover-worthy plays if he holds the ball for longer than 2.5 seconds. So get the ball out quickly, be efficient. Florida side of things, I think for Graham Mertz, it's the same kind of thing, but this Miami defense, I think, is more workable. I think if this Florida offense can be a little bit more explosive than they were last year, I actually see a world where they pull off this upset. But I think it's going to be a close game regardless.
Yes. Look, the number one storyline in this game is the coaches. It's can Florida surprise people as they have lower expectations this season? Their over-under win total is something like 4.5. Miami's expected to do big things this season. They're expected to be in Charlotte for the ACC championship game by most that I know. By myself, I think that's quite a possibility. I think their schedules sets up very favorably, as we talked about what feels like a long time ago in our preview when we previewed Miami. But they have a revamped offense and a relatively soft schedule outside of this game and one or two others. Number one thing for Miami is like they have to show that they can be better situationally and that they can be better in one-score games. They were 2-4 in one-score games last year. That killed them. And there were some horrific mistakes that we don't need to relive. I believe I saw today that they hired a time management coach to help Mario with some of those late game situations. With the expanded coaching staffs this year, you can have all your analysts down the field coaching. That was another rule change that they made. We'll see if that helps Miami. I think it's as simple as like for Cam Ward in Miami, like don't shoot yourselves in the foot. Don't get into third down and long situations, 3rd and 8+. Try to keep it 3rd and manageable. Get the ball in different ways to your dynamic first team all Pac-12 transfer running back Damian Martinez, one of the best backs in the portal. You can get him the ball in the passing game and the running game. You want to kind of stretch this Florida defense and those athletes up front, sideline to sideline. Tire them out a little bit. On Florida's side, you want to impose your will up front. How do you do that? Well, with all the athletes that you recruit year after year, you gotta pressure Cam Ward. That's number one. We know. I do think crowd noise playing in Gainesville in that heat.
Yeah.
I think is in favor of Florida because it's a new helmet system communication. We saw even in Dublin last weekend, both quarterbacks, DJU and Georgia Tech's quarterback, were struggling to hear. I think that could play a factor for Florida defensively. All these new transfer portal additions are great, but until you're trailing by a touchdown in the fourth quarter on the road in week 1 in a pressure-packed environment in Gainesville against SEC athletes, how do you really know how they're going to respond? I don't know if that will happen, but if it did, we'll have to find out. I went back and forth on this one. I think I'm going to – that's wrong, by the way. Florida's not favored by 2.5. That should be plus 2.5. They're the underdogs. If this was 3.5, I would take Florida in the points, but I think I'm going to go Miami. But it's still going to be a close, it's going to be a one possession game. But I don't know if I feel comfortable predicting like a 1-point loss because that'd be pretty
Yeah,
hard.
I gotta be honest with you. I think if I were to choose an upset out of the matchups we're covering, this would be the one. I think I'm gonna go ahead and pick Florida to cover and Miami to win, just because I believe in Cam Ward a lot, and I think he'll be able to kind of overcome the ruckus environment. But there's a chance that crowd and that momentum that they're going to have from it, they might come out and stomp Miami early, and maybe Miami will have to kind of come back and get things together late in the game. But it's gonna be amazing to watch.
Yeah. I'll go 27-23 Miami.
Okay, I'll go 31-30, game-winning field goal in the final seconds.
Love it. I'd rather that happen than my prediction, honestly. All right. To the biggest game of the weekend, in my opinion. Number 7, Notre Dame at number 20, Texas A&M. Texas A&M is a favorite at home in Kyle Field, minus 2.5. A lot of people think that Texas A&M is the sleeping giant in the SEC this year with Connor Weigman healthy at quarterback. This game is Saturday, 6:30 on ABC. Emmy, what do you see here?
Well, the main thing that I see is Riley Leonard facing his former head coach, Mike Elko, who is a defensive-minded coach.
Yeah.
What will Mike Elko throw at him? I think there might be some exotic blitzes. There might be some, post-snap coverage changes that might get pulled out of the bag. I think there's going to be some interesting wrinkles, and I think I wanted to lead with that just because that's so important to know, on a scouting standpoint, a guy's weaknesses that's your opponent. So that's going to be a big thing to me. And then the other side of it, when Texas A&M has the ball, the middle of the field in particular, I think Notre Dame, from a number standpoint, was fantastic on the perimeter, covering from the numbers to the sideline, but they were vulnerable in the middle of the field. We saw that in the Ohio State game where Emeka Buka kind of went off on them a little bit. So Notre Dame, I think, the question is, did they improve that part of things from a defensive standpoint? And can Connor Weigman take advantage if they didn't? And ultimately, I think this Texas A&M offense will be able to find success in the middle of the field. And I feel pretty comfortable trusting this Texas A&M wide receiver group to be able to find those soft spots in the coverage.
Yeah, I have a couple things here, but I'll be quick. So number one for me is absolutely when Notre Dame is on offense, I'm looking at this offensive line. Why am I looking at the offensive line? Well, we know they have Riley Leonard, but he's coming off some nagging, I think, ankle injuries from last year. Notre Dame with some injuries in fall camp and over the course of the summer, they're starting two freshmen on the left side of their offensive line. They're starting a true freshman at left tackle and Anthony Knapp, and they're starting a redshirt freshman at left guard, Sam Pendleton. And that's where my eyes go, the left side of the offensive line, because who does A&M have? They have Shamar Turner, who's a stud, a former 5-star. They have Shamar Stewart, same thing, a stud, a blue chipper on the defensive line. They bring in Nick Scourton, who led the SEC in sacks and is going to be going up against a true freshman making his first start in Kyle Field with all that crowd noise and all that pressure to perform. That's where I could see this game getting out of hand a little bit for Notre Dame early. This, if nothing else, this Notre Dame offense, I know it's asking a lot. This offensive line needs to play clean. Can't have pre-snap penalties, put yourself in third and long, second and long situations where you're backed up in your own end zone and you're having to have Riley Leonard and these receivers make plays all game long. Got to be in manageable situations. And then you can't allow Riley Leonard to be running for his life the entire game. I think I read a stat earlier across the offensive line that's going to be playing or at least starting the game for Notre Dame on Saturday, 6 career starts going into Kyle Field against that defensive line. It just doesn't look good for me for Notre Dame on that side. If they are going to have success offensively, along with that offensive line, these wide receivers need to show up. Chris Mitchell, who's a transfer they brought in from FIU, needs to show up big time. Bo Collins, who's from Clemson, and then some of their younger guys that are going into their second year. I'm looking for an emergence from a guy like Jaden Greathouse, or maybe a Jaden Thomas. Like, they have guys in the receiver room. This is probably the most talented wide receiver room that we've seen the past couple of years at Notre Dame with the addition of Chris Mitchell. But those guys are going to have to make some plays for Riley Leonard. And then on the other side of the ball, for A&M, I'm kind of looking at their interior offensive line versus this Notre Dame defensive line. Notre Dame has some nice players at edge. RJ Oben is a transfer in from Duke, but the strength of the unit is the defensive tackles. Howard Cross III, who was a second-team All-American last year, and Riley Mills. That duo generated 71 quarterback pressures last season. They're veteran players. And that's where I look for Notre Dame to try to create pressure. If they can do that and they can get Connor Weigman on the ground, that's going to be key.
Yeah.
And then I look for Colin Klein, kind of that the new offensive coordinator comes in from Kansas State, the matchup between his offense and Notre Dame's linebackers, because they're replacing 2 NFL draft picks at inside linebacker. They're going to have a true sophomore who takes over at that
York,
spot. Yep. And so, like, Notre Dame's linebackers need to be on point. But I got A&M in this game. I think A&M's they have the better athletes. I think Connor Weigman will end up being the better quarterback. And if I'm wrong, I'll say it on Sunday. But I'm not picking an offensive line with 6 career starts and 2 true freshmen on the left side to win in Kyle Field.
Yeah.
Just not doing it.
I see it the same way, man. And you know what? Like Notre Dame, if their offensive line turns out to not be a problem, it'll be like, oh, we should have seen that coming. Like Notre Dame always has a good offensive line. But like right now, it's just hard to see that coming to fruition. You're playing at College Station week 1. Like
It's because
that's
it's
a
week
lot to
one.
ask. That's a lot to ask.
If this game was week 3, it could be a little different. But because it's week 1, it's just it's a ton to ask of those freshmen. All right, let's wrap this episode up with the Sunday night game
Yep.
between USC and LSU. LSU is and by the way, I have A&M winning and covering in the Notre Dame game.
I do as well.
LSU minus 4.5 in Vegas. This isn't. I shouldn't have put the at. It's a neutral site game in Vegas Sunday at 6:30 on ABC. What do you got, Emmy?
Well, to me, it's who improved their defense more.
Yeah.
LSU went out, they changed their defensive coaching staff. They overhauled it. I think they did a fantastic job too with that. USC did the same thing. They overhauled their defensive staff. They brought in D'Anton Lynn from UCLA, who also brought over a couple of his defensive backs from over there as well. And we saw a complete overhaul in terms of the transfer portal for USC as well. Like they brought in 8 defensive guys in total in the transfer portal, and 6 of them had a PFF grade higher than 70 last year, which is really, really good. So they're bringing in a lot of impact guys. To me, it just comes down to how will that mesh, and then on the LSU side is like, was it a coaching thing or was it a talent thing? Like you can't, you can coach a untalented defense into being a okay unit, but there's a ceiling there. So I think from LSU standpoint, there's a belief there that they already had the talent. They just got to get the coaching right. So who you pick in this game, I think just comes down to that, because I think both quarterbacks are in offenses where they're going to be set up to succeed. They both have great weapons. They both have good offensive lines. So it really just comes down to the defenses.
Yes, I'll add a couple more things. Look, in Brian Kelly's first 2 years in Baton Rouge, he's 0-2 in the opener. So that's interesting, though. I think they're going to win this one. I have the Tigers winning and covering, probably by about a touchdown. I do think it'll be a higher scoring affair. If I have to pick, though, I side LSU for a couple reasons. Number one, I just think going up against a first-year starting quarterback, I think the front seven is going to have some success in getting to, maybe not even getting to Miller Moss, but throwing off his timing a little bit. He's a first-year starter. I think they have enough playmaking ability in the front seven to get in the backfield, force pressure situations. They just have to make sure they finish those plays. I'm looking at Harold Perkins to be a big factor, making some plays in this game. Savion Jones, Greg Penn. If you're LSU, you just want to set the tone on the line of scrimmage. I think you had the advantage, even with a guy like Bear Alexander coming back for USC on their interior of their defensive line. This offensive line for LSU is like the strength of the team. So I think if I have to pick which quarterback will maybe be affected more by the opposing defense in this particular matchup because of LSU's offensive line, I think it'll be Miller Moss for USC. And then I think for LSU, the best way to allow Nussmeier to settle in would be just to maul with this O-line and this running back room. Get off to a hot start on the ground. Establish the run. Again, establishing the line of scrimmage is basically, I think, if LSU does that, they're going to win this game, and they're probably going to do it fairly convincingly. Because maybe Lincoln Riley proves me wrong. And look, LSU is still going to have to prove that they can limit those explosive plays on the back end. That's kind of the worry for me. But and a guy like Zachariah Branch for USC scares me. He's an absolute stud. He's going into his second year. And I think he was an All-American on special teams last year. Don't punt to him if you're LSU. That's another thing. Like, don't give him any chances if you can help it. I just think I forgot where I was going with it. I just think it's going to be interesting to see, how much disruption LSU can cause against Miller Moss because he's a good player. I'll go LSU. Goodness, I think this is going to be maybe of all the games that we talked about, like on both sides, aside from the Texas game, which is probably going to be more one-sided, this could probably have the highest total. You don't have a Jaden Daniels. You don't have those receivers from a year ago, but I still think LSU gets into the 30s here. I'll go 34-21.
Okay. Yeah.
30,
I actually see it a little
34-24.
bit differently. I'm actually going to take USC.
Interesting.
When reading up on this game, trying to prepare for this episode, I find it interesting that both of these quarterbacks have kind of sat and waited their turn. These are not, typical first-year starters at quarterback. They both understand their systems extremely well. So if you look at it from that standpoint, I think Lincoln Riley obviously has a lot to prove after these last couple of years, kind of being disappointing as an overall head coach. So I think there's a reason to kind of doubt whether with a new starting quarterback whether things will click as well as they have in years past. But I think I believe in it. I'm on the Miller Moss kind of bandwagon now. I think with him being in the system as long as he has, I think he'll be able to run the offense extremely efficiently, even with the defensive line that LSU presents. I feel like Lincoln Riley will have a really good plan for that. And I think it'll be an extremely tight game, but it's college football, and I honestly, I think I'm just going to try to pick at least one upset every week, even if it doesn't make a whole ton of sense. But
Fair enough. It's college football. I'll go. I think I'll go LSU 34-24. Do you have a score in mind for
yeah,
USC?
I'm going to say it's a little bit more high scoring. I'm going to say, 38-31 in overtime. 37-31 in overtime.
Wow. Okay. That'd be a big win. It'd be a big win for Lincoln Riley and USC to get off to that kind of start.
For sure.
That's week 1 in college football, ladies and gentlemen. We will see where we were right, where we were wrong on Sunday night after all the games are over. Well, actually, I don't know when we'll be recording on Sunday night. We have a fantasy draft, and we also will have this game on the television on Sunday night. So we'll see what our schedule looks like. But overall, when we do our recap show, we'll see where we were right, where we were wrong, or maybe we were all right. Who knows? Hopefully the Longhorns take care of business. So again, just a couple reminders before we get out of here. Number 1, Jamie French announces his commitment tomorrow morning, bright and early. If you're up early, which I know you will be, and I will be as well, it'll be around 7:30 a.m. because he's on the East Coast. It'll be 8:30 his time. I still like Texas in that race. And then it'll be their second 5-star in a week. And by the way, Jonah Williams started his high school season tonight. He started out his high school season with first play of the game, kick return for touchdown. and then a blocked extra point. Those were his first 2 possessions. So
I find it insane that he doesn't play offense. Is
he
that
does.
weird? Like,
He does play offense.
okay, yeah, but he prefers playing safety.
Yes, that's the position he's going to play in college. But
Okay,
on his
gotcha.
team, he
Yeah,
plays everywhere. He's kind of their
I
guy.
figured. Yeah. In high school, like an athlete like that, you got to put him everywhere.
And then we'll be back Sunday night. So until then, enjoy week 1 of college football. Congratulations to Colorado for getting a week 1 win against North Dakota State.